Awesome. Thanks, Alexis, and thanks, Dulce. Hi, everyone. My name is Tanya, and I am the program supervisor for Alameda County with Tandem Partners in Early Learning. And we have the Alameda team as well as our San Francisco team, Contra Costa. So you might have heard of us, maybe seen our Green Story Cycles book bags. I always have background of books. Usually when we engage with the kiddos, they never remember my name, but they know I'm the book lady, which I'll take that as well. So it's awesome. Um, and like Alexis said, today we're going to be talking about the bilingual family, but also just tips to enhance the vocabulary, practice literacy, fall in love with books, as if you only are speaking English or are teaching the kids multiple languages as well. So next slide. So yeah, like I mentioned with Tandem. Thanks. So with Tandem, we serve kiddos 0 to 5, but we also work with all the adults. So that was the slide that was before. And so after this workshop, you will be able to use strategies to support language development of children. You will be able to explain the impact of talking to your child, and you will also recognize some common myths and truths about bilingualism. And I'll give it some time just for the translation. Awesome. So, for the strategies to build confidence and connection, we have the first really letting the child be the expert. And so, for this, we're asking kids to tell you stories, asking kids to share their expertise. That really helps them build their confidence and their pride. Oh, Dulce, if you can go back to the last one, I was just kind of slowing it down. I noticed myself going a little fast for the translation. So we're going to be on this one for a little bit. Awesome. So mistakes are also very normal and they're part of that language learning. And just using a lot of repetition to reinforce those corrections without really drawing attention to or maybe laughing at the mistake the kiddos notice. And so as they are acquiring language, be it one, two, or even three languages, just being patient and giving them time to kind of determine what language they want to use, what's the word they are looking for. Just like us as adults, sometimes even for myself, I speak English and Spanish. I know the word in Spanish, but I'm maybe talking to my friends. I was like, how do you say that? I totally forgot it. So being a little bit more patient with our kids. And most recently, in February 2018, MIT cognitive scientists found that adults in those child conversational turns. So, for example, if you ask a question where it's like, hey, what do we see outside? And they say a tree, and then you extend it by, like, yes, it has green leaves and it has small yellow flowers. Those back and forth exchanges was a better predictor of performance on those same literacy tests instead of just talking around the kids. So having those direct conversation, be it in one language, two languages, three languages, maybe four or five, just the beauty of the languages themselves, being exposed to that different vocabulary and interactions. Any questions as of now or comments? Feel free to say out loud, write in the chat, and I'll give a little bit more time in case we need to translate. Good, awesome. So next slide. Thank you, Dulce. So for this, labels are a great visual way to help young children connect words to pictures and physical objects. And in terms of the bilingual labels are also super helpful in terms of like we see here, the desk or a shelf, having those, it's double the vocabulary. And like I mentioned, just being a little bit patient for them to understand that even though it's a different word or it looks different because it's in multiple languages, it means the same exact thing: a shelf, a book, a shoe. And then they can start making those connections on their own. And as adults, just incorporating those easy techniques that just pointing, as easy as pointing, so they can start relating that when you maybe say shoe or zapato in Spanish, shoe, you're pointing to it, and so they start making those easy connections. You can also label your speech by repeating the new words over and over again. I know sometimes as adults, it's like, oh, I said it once, but maybe even reinforcing that saying 10 times, 15 times, so they can really, it's like, oh, this is a word, we've used it often. And I know that if they say this word, it means this object. And when I see this object, it means this word. So they start making those connections. And we always have this technique when we go into bilingual classrooms of quote unquote changing the channel. So we have the kiddos where it's like, if we're doing a bilingual read aloud, where it's like, hey, like the first part is in English. Now let's change our channels with our ears. Now we're gonna say this second part in Spanish. So they start to decipher, oh, when this first part was in English, those were the words we heard. And then when we change the channels, these were the Spanish words we heard here. So they can start to define the boundaries between their two languages or even the three or four that you guys were mentioning in your comments. And it's fun. Sometimes it's like, oh, we're changing the channels, kind of like robots. So we found that to be successful in our bilingual read alouds when we go into bilingual classrooms. Any questions, comments on here?
Tanya, can I make a comment?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So I've been raising my kid mostly as a Spanish speaking since he was very little, and his dad speaks to him in English mostly. So it was very interesting for me to see that even when he was very little, like 2 or 3, he would recognize kind of the difference in the languages, even though we never
Mhm.
told him this is Spanish or this is English. I think that children can, I don't know exactly what it is, but it's like I don't know if it's in the intonation or the different phonemes or just like differences they can tell since they're very little, differences between languages. And I just think
Yeah,
it's very interesting.
Yeah, thank you for sharing those. And that is so true. And it actually relates to one of the myths. I was like, oh, we're just setting the seed for the myths and truths. And definitely the kiddos start to, I was like, oh, but you didn't give anything away. It's still gonna be a trick question. But yeah, the kiddos start to notice that in the phonemes, the reactions, the expressions, and as adults, that's actually our way of helping finishing a sentence, the way we use an exclamation mark when we're super excited and now we're really sad and maybe it's the end of a sentence. And also with the kids, they will also start to determine, depending on what language the adults give them, once they start to acquire that language and vocabulary, they actually decipher who they speak Spanish to or maybe English, where it's like, oh, this is the language I normally is repeated from this individual, and they also know how to manipulate that. So it's not just the vocabulary or even the phonemes, phonological awareness. It's also, it's like, hey, I always get Spanish as I'm starting to decide like what the language is from this individual, so I'm going to continue that. And like for me with my parents, it's like a combo of everything. So at this point, I was like, I know that's the comfort language there, but with my aunt, it's only Spanish. With my fiance, it's only English. So it'll start to capture that very early on. Awesome. Did anyone else have any comments or questions? Also, feel free to write them on the chat or say it out
Um,
loud.
Amy,
Oh
it's
yeah, go
Amy.
ahead. Hi,
Yeah,
Amy.
I don't want to jump ahead of what your presentation, but I just want to share. I have a similar. Well, no, I don't have a similar situation. I'm raising my son alone right now. His father is like in another country, so
Hmm.
and he's Spanish speaking. But I think my main thing, maybe when you're answering the myths, is I worry. I can tell that he can tell the different languages, and I don't feel that worried, but I think what I worry later is as he advances, and because Spanish is not my native tongue, I'm asking myself when I need to start speaking to him more in English because that is my native tongue. And I've read that it's really important they hear you speak your native tongue, because you have a very deep understanding of phrases and sayings and different forms and things that in a second language you might not know. But I think maybe my fear is, as he gets older, he's only he's not even 2.5 yet. So right now everything's fine. When I make mistakes, he seems to go with me if I correct it. Like, we correct it and we're fine. But I think because I'm not a native speaker, I worry that he'll learn it incorrectly sometimes. He gets Spanish at daycare. So he has a whole environment. He spends his day with Spanish. So that's great. But later on, when he gets older, I worry that because I'm not a native speaker, if his dad's not living with us yet, if he's going to be learning it in a weird way or something, like in a second language way.
Yeah, definitely. And thank you for sharing, Amy. Like we mentioned with all of our workshop, every child is different. They acquire 1, 2, 3 languages at a different pace. But like you said, I would only reinforce that practicing the language that you feel most comfortable to establish that strong foundation of phonics, phonological awareness, even sentence structures or expressions of each. And I'm glad you also mentioned there's the different exposure at school. So then he'll start to, depending, there's also, I've heard I will ask maybe Dulce or Alexis, dual languages classrooms as they also get older, for classrooms that they're getting both languages at the same time, if that's of interest. But just reinforcing that using the language that you feel most comfortable to establish that strong foundation, and then acquiring a new language becomes easier, because then they have like, oh, this is how a sentence, this is how we end a sentence, this is how we express when we're showing emotion, and so forth. So yeah, and we will cover a little bit of that in the myths and truths. And thank you for sharing once again. Any others? No? And if something comes up later, we can always reference it. I was like, oh, I think the baby has something to say. Yeah, we can move to the next slide, Dulce. Awesome. Great. And so just with reading, with language acquisition, with language development, we do have the American Literacy Association. They determined these skills to help with language acquisition, with reading, with literacy. The first one being print motivation. So an interest in books and a desire to read and learn. We have vocabulary, knowing the words to name and also describe things in detail. We have print awareness, noticing letters and words, knowing how to handle a book and follow text on a page. We have letter knowledge, and that is knowing that the shapes, names, and sounds of each letter, recognizing them everywhere. We have narrative skills, so the ability to describe events and tell stories with a beginning, middle, and end. And the last one, and Dulce kind of mentioned a little bit, phonological awareness, the ability to hear and play with the smaller sounds in words. So with this, that's why we always reinforce having those conversations, be it with a book or just on a walk outside when we go to the park, always having those fruitful conversations with our little ones to expand the vocabulary for them to start making those connections that these letters build this word, and I'm just building on that vocab. The need to kind of tell stories and bringing in those narrative skills with a beginning, middle, and end, and just making all those connections where it happens in the classroom, but we also want that to happen in the home. Any questions or comments? Good.
我想問啊，因為我哋係講中文啦，我又唔識英文啦，咁咧變咗就係好似睇啲書啦，係啲英文，咁我就即係好難咁去讀一本英文書，咁我女咧就好似冇乜感興趣咁樣去睇書嘅，咁我係咪選擇啲中文嘅書去同佢讀咧？
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Tanya? Hello?
Yes.
Yes. Indy shared that her language is Cantonese, and she doesn't know much in English. But if she read an English book to her daughter, she doesn't feel comfortable. So that may cause her daughter doesn't have interest in reading. So it is good for her to switch to reading Chinese books.
Alexis, quick question. I'm not hearing. Are they translating back or?
Hello, can you hear me, Tanya?
We can hear you.
But Tanya, it seems that Tanya cannot hear me, right? Uh,
Tanya,
what
can
should
you
I?
hear us?
Yes.
I can hear you. I was just I noticed that the parent said something, so I wasn't getting the response, or if that was a comment towards me. I guess that was my confusion. Apologies.
Yeah, that is a question for you. Can anyone try repeat what I say to her? Because it seems that Tanya cannot hear me.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
Alice. Yes.
he
Yeah,
was
the parent. Okay,
Tanya,
sorry.
can
Go
you hear
ahead.
me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
He was saying that the parent doesn't feel comfortable, doesn't know too much English. So reading a book in English, she doesn't feel too comfortable doing it, which then makes the child a little less interested in doing that reading. So they go to a Chinese book instead.
Yeah, and for that, I would say, and it relates to our book bag program, we send books home in different languages, some of them even wordless. What I would reinforce, just like I told Amy, practicing that language that feels more comfortable to the adult. And we always frame it as like it could be a teaching moment for both the child and the adult, where if you maybe read a book that's wordless or in English, share the story of the pictures in the language that you feel more comfortable, and then you can ask the question back to the child. Oh, now can you read it back to me in English? And if we're not at the point where they can read the text, what do you see in the pictures? So then they kind of are in the interest of, we're getting the language that the parent or caregiver is most comfortable with, but also it's kind of like a challenge for them. It's like, hey, what do you see here? Tell me in whatever language you feel comfortable to tell the story. So it's kind of like double the exposure to the book and to the multiple languages that the child is learning. And thank you, Alexis. I was like, I'm not hearing anything. I was like turning up the volume. I was like, I hear everyone, but not the translation.
We have
我
a
就係見咧，佢好似睇電視咧，佢就可以學到好多嘅英文嗰啲單詞咧，佢有時會講出嚟，即係我都唔識嘅咁。但係睇書好似佢上課咁樣，老師讀嗰啲好短嘅嗰啲書仔啦，用英文嗰啲書仔，佢就點讀佢都記唔到嗰個字咁樣嘅，讀好多次好多次佢都記唔到嘅睇書，係咪因為我哋少同佢講英文？
Yes. Indy shared the experience that she said that her daughter learned her English vocabulary through TV. So she learned a lot of English vocabulary. But when I observed her classroom reading, when the teacher was reading English book to her, and it seems that she doesn't show much interest in reading. So this is because I read English, poor English. Yes. It is because I speak poor English at home. So by reading English book to her, that have a negative impact on her English development or her interest in reading English book. That is her question.
Tanya, did you hear?
No, I hear the mom speaking, but then when it comes to the translation, I'm not getting anything.
Okay. So the mom was saying that her daughter learned a lot of English from TV, like vocabulary, but when she was going to school, the teacher the teacher would read books in English, and then the child has not been showing any, or like a lot of interest in reading. So she's wondering if it's because she speaks a poor English at home, that she's not showing a lot of interest in reading. Jake, did I get it right?
Yes, you're right. You're correct.
For that, my tip would be like I mentioned, no child is the same. I would say my tip for that would be maybe finding interest that they have in books or in literacy. As you can see from my back, I always love that Pete the Cat pizza. If maybe their favorite food is pizza, picking books about that, about dogs, we always kind of find where it's like, oh, maybe it's not the book that they love. But then when you come across a favorite title or a favorite character, there's a little bit more interest. Also bringing fun where if you notice maybe it's just they want to maybe go play, which is equally great. Making it into a game where it's like we read one page and then we act what the characters are doing, and you can incorporate multiple languages in that. That would be my tip for that. Every child is different, but we have seen some success where it's like you start introducing characters, storylines, activities into the reading itself, and then their interest. Sometimes it's just for 15 minutes that they can sit there before maybe something else distracts them, or even 10. It's just building that repetition that maybe next time they're like, hey, we haven't read the book or the 2 pages, that turned into a game in any language or multiple languages at the same time.
Can I just add that reassurance that it's not on the parents? It's not the mom's fault that the child is not showing interest, or it's not because of if you're not fluent in English. That's not what it is. It's definitely a child's interest, just like Tanya was saying.
And then we did have a comment in the chat. Tanya, would you like me to read it out?
Yes, but let me scroll back. I think I was in the thanks, Alexis. I was like, I think I might have lost it at the top. Is it the one from Amy?
Yes.
My concern. So my concern about that, though English is my native tongue, I can speak Spanish, and I speak Spanish only with his father. I worry that the dominant language will eventually take over, which is often happens when children are older. I know so many people who Spanish-speaking children refuse or lose Spanish or other languages in elementary. Like I mentioned, every child is different. My tip and my advice, kind of like for my parents, that they did, where I to this day speak English and Spanish fluently in both. They just continued practicing. I went to schools that it was only English, and so they practice it even with TV shows, or what my mom would be like telenovelas, and having that exposure, and then maybe finding other outlets that offer where it's like after school program, that if maybe you don't speak that language but they've had some exposure, things that interest them, maybe an art class that's in Spanish, or a team or a frisbee team, and the coach speaks in both English and Spanish. So there's a lot of opportunities to kind of bring in the exposure to language if maybe the adult doesn't speak the second language. And I would say it's exposure. Every child is different, but I could confidently say for myself, it was always just whether from extended family, at school friends, teachers, that I always kind of had the second language or Spanish, and I never lost it.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. It's like the testimony, but also I think there's this sort of there's this whole like lineage of immigrants who we come and then everybody loses their language. Like I think that's what's happened to my generation in Tagalog. So I feel like I don't want to repeat that, but I think knowing that if I keep maintaining him in different circles, and it's also, I think for those who might be single moms.
I can hear the translator.
Oh, maybe I'm talking too fast. I'll text it.
And then
Oh, what was that, Alexis?
I think yik is okay. Yik.
Oh, okay, awesome.
One
Can I have
last.
a minute to interpret back to the parents?
Yes.
Just 1 minute. Okay.
I just texted it in case it helps with the translation situation.
Thank you so much, Amy.
Awesome. And then the one last question was about, I think you mentioned a program where folks can get books for their kids.
Oh, I was talking in regards to our Story Cycles program with Tandem, our school to home book rotation. And it might be that they go to a school that they currently have it, or we provide schools. I can provide my email and they can reach out. It might be at a school where we're already at. Also, I recommend going to our website. We also have giveaway books, opportunities for that, and we always update that. So I'll share my email at the end along with the resources. But the book home to school to home book program was the one that we have in preschools, infant toddler rooms, child development center. So that one's actively going on. But there's also other opportunities that Tandem has giveaway books. So I'll drop all that information. Yeah, thank you for the clarification. I know sometimes like we're not in all the places, we're in some, but there's other opportunities if you don't happen to be at the school site where we have story cycles. Awesome. Thank you, Alexis. And awesome. If no one, I think we captured everything, but if something else comes up, feel free to write it in the chat and we'll make it work. And apologies that I'm not hearing the translation. I was like, I think I did it last time, but not this time. Awesome. And you can, yeah, just have all of them show up. So with that, just as adults, the tools we can use, different techniques. We know our children best, know their likes, their dislikes, and can make these activities and language acquisition fun. So I wanted to ask you, sometimes we have no book, and that is absolutely no problem. We can develop early literacy skills anytime, anywhere. And so I wanted to ask you all, looking at the pictures or the images on the slide, we have one where they're in the kitchen, we have one where they're at the park, at the grocery store, in the car. How can you develop and reinforce these skills that we talked about in the previous slide, which is narrative, telling a story, phonological awareness, noticing the sounds, vocabulary, learning new words. How can you develop those skills, or really any skills about speech, language, literacy in these locations? And feel free to drop in the chat, say it out loud, and I'll wait for translation too.
Yeah, for me, so sometimes I like to bring my kids to the park and then I try to let them count the flower and what is this? So they will let me know, oh, flowers and the glass and the rocks, something like that, to let them know to fill up the vocabulary and something. So yeah, that's I maybe feel excited so they know yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. So yeah, they're getting new vocab. Maybe they didn't know a rock was called a rock, or the flowers. And the beauty of that, there's so many flowers, different colors. So then they're getting not only the flower name, that texture, how to describe it, but also just the different kinds. So vocabulary, a great one there. And even I incorporate this one for the self-regulation and kind of getting your body back if you're having maybe a bad day or feeling a little angry or upset, using the flower trick where it's like you smell the flower and then you breathe out. So a breathing exercise for that. So That just sparked when you said flowers. I was like, oh, sometimes we have bad days where you just like breathe in, breathe out. And to my point of like language, books, reading, sharing that knowledge, making it always fun for kids so they don't always feel like it's a homework, but it's like, hey, I look forward to this tomorrow, to those 10-15 minutes I get to engage in this conversation with the adults who are in my life. So yeah, the flower one is great, and the park and the rocks. Any others?
Yeah. Hi, good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon.
I would say that I utilize like song with my boys. I have like 8-month-old twins. So I would do, like kind of sit them on my lap and do a little bit of like patty cake. And they really enjoy that, gets them like engaged, and they're just like watching you. And another thing I do is kind of I watch their eyes and what's catching their attention. So if we're in the room and our dog runs in, and they're always looking, so that their eyes like dart to the dog, and I'm like, I just take the opportunity to connect what has their attention, and I'm like, dog, you see the dog? Or I'll sit my sons in front of the window in a chair, and then I'll just face him towards the window, like just like I'm rocking him, and then they'll watch things outside. So when the car goes by, I'm like, car. So I just like look for their eyes as cues, to identify and try to get them to verbally, kind of connect what they're seeing with the language. So that's kind of like what I do outside of books and stuff.
Awesome, that's great. And I see them in the picture. I was like, I think they're looking at me. So that's awesome. So yeah, I was like, oh, you're right. I think I'm catching their attention. My name is Tanya. I'm the book lady. But yeah, no, that's awesome. And well, a point for that where it's like our kiddos, like especially the 0 to 2, that they're still acquiring that language, maybe not talking yet, really pointing and saying it like repetition, saying it out loud. And then I'm sure every time you say dog or car, it's like, what? I see that. I can't yet talk or like know what's happening, but even that reaction. So yeah, getting those small cues from the kiddos that come from their eyes, if they're paying attention to something, to laughter or the babbling. So yeah, like I mentioned, as adults, as caregivers, parents, you know them best, and just kind of grabbing from those and modifying and introducing. It's like, yeah, I can approach this way to teach this skill, and just further reinforcing that language acquisition and literacy and just the love for books and language and those conversations. Thank you for sharing. And I love the picture. I was like, I see them.
No problem. Thank you.
And then we had 2 comments in Chinese. If Yik wants to share anything. Okay. Yik said it will be great if I can have books mailed to my home during the pandemic time.
So we don't mail books home, but I can definitely connect you to some resources. I know Tandem specifically doesn't, but we can connect. I'll put the information. I know we're connected with different organizations, or even I know library sometimes does that as well. So yeah, we can definitely connect. And even though our organization doesn't do it, I can do some quick research and get that information to you as well. Yeah, thank you for sharing, Alexis. Did I miss another one? Was there a second comment that?
Yes, that's a second comment. Yes, there's a second comment in Chinese saying that if the kid only read those picture books, he won't let me describe to read it to him. He would like to read it by himself. Is it okay? Picture books.
For picture books, the child likes to read them themselves instead of like having the parent read to them. So like, is that okay?
Totally. Building that self-confidence, they know how to handle the book. It might be that they're just pointing. It might be that they point to a dog and they say cat. It's that engagement that we love to start having them fall in love with books and literacy, and kind of reinforcing that it's like, yeah, they're probably going to call a dog a cat, but making it a conversation, or like, why do you think that's a dog? Or saying like, oh, that's very similar. They're not only making the sounds like meow or woof woof. And so always engagement in that, and it's totally okay. We want them to do that, just that confidence where it's like, this is my book. I know everything that's gonna happen here. I'm pointing to the pictures I like. And then at one point, it's like they read it to you and you read it back. So it's that engagement and that interaction with that. So yeah, completely okay. Awesome. And so yeah, this is incredible. You already have so many great ideas about how to support early literacy everywhere you go. And if it's with a book, great, but also just using our surroundings every day to promote that and utilize them to further re-enhance or enhance that literacy, love for books, love for conversation, and acquisition of vocabulary. And as families, you are the most valuable tool for supporting your kids' early literacy skills. So, really, the time you spend exploring and talking about the world together really develops these foundational skills. So, continue doing the great activities and providing that support.
Yeah, I have another question.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, my daughter, so for the book, right? So when she read the books and she often used the picture and then converts the contents of the text, she changed everything. So should I need to correct her or just let she continue, just go ahead?
And if I'm understanding, so she's deciding to tell her own story with just the pictures and not follow the text?
Yeah, she read the book by herself and
Uh-huh.
then she changed everything like the just look the flower just says oh flower hi like that's something but does not connect with the contents, right? So
Uh-huh.
should I correct her or just let her go ahead like that?
Uh, we usually in our read alouds, we love it when that happens. And if they really get captivated by that flower, extending the conversation there, because then you start noticing those, it's like, oh, they're really interested in flower. The next book we pick or the next activity. And really, we say the book is just a tool. It's if you follow the text grade, if you follow the pictures, or really you just need to touch it to get inspired to tell your own story. We just want them to talk and for that those adults to also talk to them and have those great conversations. And so if they open up the page and they read the first sentence and then get captivated by a flower and have a 1 hour conversations about why yellow flowers are beautiful, so be it. Even in that conversation, there's vocabulary being acquired, social emotion, where it's like, how does this flower make you feel? How does the other flowers make you feel? We can always pull from that. And as adults, guide the conversation, introduce new feelings, new vocabulary, and even maybe ask questions for that critical thinking and to come back to it the next day. So if they're interested in the book, because of the text grade, if they're interested in the book because of the pictures grade, it's that just daily dose of conversation that we're really aiming for. So,
Oh,
so
sounds great.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, anyone loves flowers. I was like, oh yeah, I could get distracted all day walking through the garden. So yeah, we love that. And
Yeah,
thank you for sharing.
thank you.
And so, Dulce, next slide. And so for this one, just really reinforcing using songs, rhymes, games. And from what I'm hearing from you, it could be a game about a flower. It could be a game about the cars, the dogs you see. So just making it fun and capturing what they're interested in. So this one was a little quick. So now let's play some myths and truths. And so for this one, I'm gonna say a comment and then feel free to say it out loud or write it in the chat if you think it's a myth or a truth. And so for the first one is children can recognize and begin understanding words in 2 different languages before they turn 1. Do you think
Truth.
that's truth? Awesome, truth. I see truth. In
True.
also the chat, I hear truth. I hear some kiddos
Yeah,
also
that's true.
truth. And so those of you click once more, yay. I was like, there's a lot of clicking in the following one. So yeah, so this is definitely truth. Patricia Cole and her team at the University of Washington found that babies as early as 6 months old can recognize the small differences in all the sounds and languages, kind of like what Dulce was mentioning in the beginning. And really, we like to consider babies as language geniuses as they're picking up all these different cues. And really, it's never too early to start exposing them to those different words and sounds and emotions in the language that you feel most comfortable in. So yeah, definitely truth. All of us get 100 points for that. So now on to the next one. So a child can learn a second language very quickly. Is this a truth, a myth?
True.
So true. I see some yeses, some truths in the chat. So yes. Okay. And if you can click twice, Dulce. So this is both a truth and a myth. So yeah, it's like for the yeses, maybe 50 points out of 100. So this is both, like I mentioned, a myth and a truth, because it really depends on what we mean by quickly. Like I mentioned, every child is different. They have a different pace to learn, different techniques that works best for them. And it ranges the time to acquire the language or a second or a third language. For conversational language, it usually develops quickly between the 1 to 2 years. And then academic language usually takes between 5 to 7. So that's why this one was a little tricky in terms of adding that quickly, because definitely language can be learned, but it depends on every child, on their learning methods, techniques that work best for them. And for some, it just might take a little longer, some more fast. It really depends on every child. But as adults, being patient, supportive, finding those tools from their likes, dislikes to further enhance that learning that they're probably getting at school with that second language or third, and then just reinforcing that with techniques at home as well. And then the last one. So total immersion without explicit teaching is the best way for a child to learn a language. Is that a myth or a truth? So I see mixed. So yeah, it's like, I didn't mean to be tricky for all of them with the truth and myth, but yeah, it's mixed. So true or true. And so Dulce, it is a myth. So kind of like what Amy mentioned, it's like maybe so. So really there is no scientific evidence to support the claim that the more children are immersed in the new language, the more they will learn. Studies have shown that what counts is not just the quantity, but the quality of exposure. So students need that comprehensible input, like to learn it a different way, different exposures, and they need to understand most what they're hearing in order to pick up the new vocabulary in a new language. So like I mentioned, you all know your kids best. Also, if maybe they're learning it from a teacher, they kind of know their learning styles. So getting it a variety of ways, presentations, and not just because we're in this class, there needs to be that support and attention for that as well. So yeah. So this one wasn't as tricky. I know that the previous one was like, maybe it's 50-50 with that quickly, but just some quick myths and truths that I know we're reaching the end of the workshop. And Dulce, we can actually skip that one and go to the next one. So really, like I mentioned, children are language geniuses and they can learn fast, but they need our support. Just like when you all mentioning all the things, all the wonderful things you are doing now with techniques, tools, talking about dogs or cars or flowers, giving them that extra time, the patience for them to start making those connections. And so we can skip that one too, Dulce. And for this one, so we maybe in like the next 2 minutes, I wanted to take the time to share the resources for learning at home. So I'll drop this along. I can actually do it now. So we have a variety of multilingual read-alouds on our website, and I do some of the read-alouds, the rest of our staff do too. And so it's just a great opportunity for the kids to learn about new books and also maybe get a new language in there. We have Cantonese, Arabic, Farsi, Spanish, English, Tagalog, so quite a few of them. So feel free to explore. We also have, oh, and I think I just shared it to Alexis directly. I'll put it for everyone. The next slide, Dulce. Many workshops and read-alouds available to the community. I know sometimes we connect with partners such as Brilliant Baby. I'm putting the calendar, but there's also other opportunities depending on which one might work to attend workshops and read aloud. So that's the calendar I just put there. I will also type in my email. I know there was some questions in regards to the book program or other resources, so feel free to email me. I'll try to respond as soon as possible. And also, if I don't have the information, I can do some research and do some connections to maybe orgs. I know that for the sending the books home through the mail. So doing that.
If they don't go to work Friday, we can leave Thursday. Not like that's fine.
Oh, and then as the last thing, we're always doing these workshops, engaging with families. We do have a survey. It's confidential, so we always, oh yeah, this one. I will be sharing the slides, which I think I already did with Alexis, and also any handouts, and then the links that I just dropped in the chat, and those will be coming to you all. Or I think, Dulce, where do they have access to these? Or I think I heard you mention that there will be the slides.
Yes, after the presentation, we'll send out the slides and any other pertinent information.
Awesome. So yes, and then the last thing was the survey that I also just dropped in the chat. When you get, it takes about 3 to 5 minutes, depending on the comments that you put. We would gladly appreciate that. And then just thank you all for your comments, just for your interaction. I love hearing from you all, and feel free. I know we, this workshop's only an hour and there's so much conversation and questions. Feel free to reach out to me, and I will definitely get that information and resources. And yeah, thank you so much, everyone.